Hi there, welcome to this month's episode of Single Mom Sessions with award-winning journalist and our featured host, Miss Mia Taylor, and our special guest, Miss Patricia Roberts, CEO and author of Route 529, A Parent's Guide to Saving for College and Career Training with 529 Plans. Stay tuned for an exciting episode. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Patricia Roberts, CEO of Gift for College and author of this fabulous book, Route 529, A Parent's Guide to Saving for College and Career with 529 Plans. Patricia, hi. It's so nice to see you again after such a long time.
So nice to see you, Mia, and thank you for inviting me on today.
Of course, as you know, I'm a big fan of yours, and I have been for a long time now, and have been following your work, read your book, and loved it. And as a single mom myself, learned a great deal from your book. So you really came to mind when we started this series of shows. And I wanted to share everything I learned from your book with our audience because it's immensely valuable. So for people who maybe are not familiar with 529 plans, and it's probably likely that you're not familiar because, as Patricia shared with me before we started our show today, 65% of Americans do not even know what a 529 plan is. And so for that reason, it's an important topic for us to talk about today. But also, as a single parent myself, I know how challenging it is when you have a lot on your plate, paying for a mortgage and all the activities for children and your car. Where do you find the money to also set aside for a goal that's, maybe 15 years, 20 years away, which is college tuition for your children, for your child. So today we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of all of that. How do you juggle all that? And how do 529 plans help make that more manageable? So Patricia, let's start with, first of all, how you develop the expertise to help families and help parents save for college.
Sure. I can mention what 529 plans are first, just to give a little background.
Yes.
So these are named after Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code. And much like 401k plans that are named after Section 401k of the code, they bear that name. These are special accounts that are for a particular purpose, and that particular purpose is higher education. And when they grow in value, the earnings on them are not taxed along the way. So they're growing for your child's future, but the earnings are not taxed. And that's unlike a variety of other accounts you may have for yourself or for your child, like a bank savings account or a mutual fund account. What's also great is when you withdraw the money you've saved for a number of years, however many years they are, and when you withdraw the money, you can use it for a wide range of qualified expenses. These include tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, even computers, at a wide range of institutions, not just college. So you may think of a traditional four-year college, but these are for community college, trade and technical school, even registered apprenticeships, graduate and professional studies. So if you take the money out of the account after it's grown tax-free and you use it for any of these qualified purposes, you'll never be taxed. And one other thing I want to point out is that what's special about 529 plans is in 37 states, and I do cover this in my book, I've got a whole listing of the states, you can take an annual state tax deduction or credit for investing in the plan. So these are special accounts for college with special tax advantages, and you, the account owner, are in control at all times of the 529 account. Unlike other forms of investing, you need to know that. So those are the highlights of 529. How did I get involved? One of my first jobs after graduating from law school at night was working at Citigroup, and I was asked as an attorney to develop expertise in Section 529. Citigroup wanted to get into this evolving line of business, this way of helping helping families save for the future. And I learned about it as an attorney. And what's interesting is I was expecting my son at the time. This was 1998, 1999 when I gave birth to him. And I was keenly interested in this topic. It was the greatest assignment for me because I was expecting a child, and I was also, together with my partner, paying back over $100,000 in student loan debt. So I knew the burden of student loan debt. I knew I wanted to do better for this child, and here I'm learning about a way to perhaps make that happen. And that's really my history of getting started. The timing couldn't be better.
Right. And I just want to share quickly for our audience, and then we'll dive into the nuts and bolts of the 529 plan. Your son graduated debt-free. Am I correct in that?
That is correct. I've got a picture of him right here on my desk. I don't know if you can see it, but this was his debt-free graduation from Clark University, both as an undergraduate and a graduate student. The 529 helped us tremendously. We started with very small contributions. I started with very small contributions, but in time, coupled with some sensible decisions about the type of school to pick and the net cost of the school, he made it through without debt. One of the proudest moments in my life. I can't think of a better contribution to his future.
That is awe-inspiring as a parent of a 10-year-old who has yet to take that journey himself. But I mentally am daunted by the thought of the costs and the fact that you have, ushered your child through that journey without him being saddled with debt at the end of it is just such a incredible role model for parents like myself. And I do. So let's dive into a little bit about how you start a 529 plan, how much money you need to get started, things that people who aren't necessarily familiar with this area of the world may not know about. So the basics. If I want to open a 529 plan, where do I go to do that?
Sure. So there are two different ways to open a 529 account, and both are just subject to the preference you may have. One is to do it directly online with the 529 plan. Every state, except for Wyoming, has a 529 plan, and you can find these very easily online. If you Google the name of your state, California, for instance, and the numbers 529 or any other state, and the District of Columbia, you can find out information about what plans they have. So you can open an account direct with the 529 plan. These are overseen by the states. Often it's the Office of the State Treasurer that oversees them. Often there's an investment management firm involved in the management of the 529 assets, but you can do it on your own. There's a lot of instruction available online. The majority of investors these days do go it alone. They do invest directly online. So if that's something you feel comfortable with, you read through the different information. There's even a call center you could call if you need a clarification. They're not going to give you investment advice because they don't know your particular circumstances, but you can read through all the information online. You can see the different types of investment options. Some are very conservative. Some may even be FDIC insured. That would give you, a lot of perhaps peace of mind, but less growth potential, right? So you're investing in something very secure. And then there are also investment options that, vary in terms of, the mix of investments in them. But there are these age-based options, which people may be familiar with from their retirement accounts. They're age-based or target date that are professionally designed, and you could choose one of them. That's actually what I invested in for my son. So based on the child's year of birth, my son was 1999, there were investment portfolios that would be suited well for him. And I think there were conservative, aggressive, or moderate. I picked moderate. So you can do it alone. Lots of information online. You can also do it with the advice and guidance of a financial advisor. If you have a financial professional in your life, why not ask them for their help in saving for higher education? They can guide you as well. So either way, there's no right or wrong here. It's what you're comfortable with.
And I want to make sure that our audience sort of really took that nugget you just dropped there away, which is that you don't have to be an investment expert to do this, and that the age-based choices within a 529 plan will basically set up your account so that it is funded the way you would like it to be by the time your child reaches college. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they're designed in such a way that the age of the child, they're either age-based or target date. They're called both.
Okay.
But either it's the target of when the child's likely to go or the age, but they're based on that. They're designed professionally by investments professionals to become more conservative, more aggressive when the child is young, more conservative as they near college. And you can see the investment performance of every investment option that a 529 plan has online. So you can see how did it perform the last year, the last 3, 5, or 10 years. That's not necessarily a guarantee of how it'll perform in the future, but you've got plenty of information is what I want to say. And there are these pre-packaged portfolios from which you can select.
Perfect. And so we know now where we have to go if we want to open them, but let's get real here for a minute and talk about how much money do you really need to start one of these plans?
Sure, that's a great question. And many people think you need a lot of money to get started. But many of the 529 plans allow you to get started with $25 and in some cases less. So it's a modest amount of money that can get that account open. And I can't stress enough to your listeners, it's so important to get started wherever you're at in the process, no matter how old or young your child is. Getting started is such an important first step, and getting started with even $25 will at least get you on the road to saving.
Right. Can you automate that from a checking account perhaps, or from a paycheck? Can you talk a little bit about, like, automating the deductions to go directly to a 529 plan? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's not only possible, it's advisable. I think the less you need to think about whether and when you're going to do something, the better. If you can automate it, all the better. And in fact, there is research that shows individuals who save, as I did, directly from their paycheck, save 75% more than individuals who aren't doing that. So I think it's because if the money doesn't first pass your hands, you're less likely to divert it to another purpose. So saving even modest amounts directly from your paycheck, adding more whenever you can, if you get a tax refund, if you get a bonus at your job, come into some money. You no longer need daycare because the child's now school age. They're out of diapers. You're saving $60 a month on diapering supplies. Whatever it is, you can always add to that account, but getting started with a fixed amount and contributing automatically, I think, is key to the success here.
And you mentioned, if you have a windfall or, you come into money, adding it to the 529 plan for your child. But I think you also mentioned in our past discussions that friends and family can add to this plan for your child, or give you money to add to this plan for their birthday. Instead of another gift that might end up in a landfill, you could have friends and family give them a little money for this account, right?
That's exactly right. And as single parents, money is often tight and there's often conflicting priorities. If you can tell those who love your child, and I bet you've got 5, 10, 15 or more people in your life that want to do something for your child, for each birthday, for each holiday. I think most families celebrate at least one holiday a year. We know the child has a birthday every year. Throw in a few religious or other milestones. You've got a lot of occasions. And if you can get real with friends and family, declare to them that you're on a journey to save for this child's future and ask them to join you. I bet many of them would be delighted to do so. It's very easy to invite friends and family to contribute. Most of the 529 plans have a really easy to use mechanism by which you can send sort of a barcode to friends and family. You can include it in a party invitation just to let them know this is what you're trying to do. Can they please join you? People don't know what to buy your son, Mia. I bet they don't know what size he is. They don't know if that's a toy or game you'll approve of, or does he already have it? Simplify it for everyone. They can buy something smaller if they want to have something for the child to open. But I'll tell you, as the mom of a debt-free grad, I can't tell you how appreciative my son is that we did engage sort of later on. I wish we had done it sooner, others to contribute. And we did encourage him to put part of his birthday money, part of any Christmas or holiday money in his account. He now knows why he started off adulthood now free of debt.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant lesson from the 529 plans. And the other thing I want you to share with our audience is something you also mentioned to me offline, which is sort of the mental motivation that goes with this dedicated savings account that a child has for their college. You know, how does that impact their trajectory when they think about college and graduating college? Doesn't it have a positive effect?
It certainly does. I mean, there's a tremendous amount that any child can learn about financial matters by watching you, walk the talk, right? So watching you save a little at a time, watching you be mindful of expenditures, etc. A
Mhm.
lot can be learned there and they can contribute to that. But the research that I shared with you, Mia, which should be interesting perhaps to your audience as well, is that even account balances in a dedicated college savings account balances of $499 or less, so it's a
Yes.
small amount of money, can impact a child's vision for their future. And in fact, this research shows that children are 3 times more likely to attend some form of higher education and 4 times more likely to complete it
Right.
when they know someone has a dedicated amount of money, even if it's a small amount, set aside for their future. And I think those were low and moderate income families that were studied there. But I would say the same probably holds true for families of all income levels.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the amount, it's the fact that you are saving, it's the
Right.
expectation that they're going to be pursuing higher education. I think that's really valuable for any child. So I
I
would
think
not overlook the benefit of that.
that's amazing. I mean, for parents, we all worry, what will my child go to college? What will happen? What will their career be? So just that benefit alone, I mean, I can't underscore that enough. Just the notion that somebody's saving for them and there are expectations that they're going to do this in life really helps reinforce their trajectory in a positive way. So that's brilliant. I want to talk a little bit about, like, you mentioned that the money can be used for tuition and books and stuff, but the money in a 529 plan doesn't just have to be used for a 4-year college. It can be used for various educational or career related purposes. Isn't that right?
That's exactly right. And on the US Department of Education website,
Mhm.
you can find information about schools that are accredited that have a federal financial aid code. Those range from cosmetology school to veterinary sciences to 2-year, 4-year trade and technical, electrical training for someone, dental hygienist. I mean, cosmetology, if I didn't already say it. I mean, there are so many forms of education. They're called college savings plans. And I think people believe that they have to be for a certain form of higher education.
Right.
They don't. So I think that's important for parents to know.
Totally. And I think the other really important thing for people to know is that if your child doesn't end up using the money, that money will not be lost, right? There are other ways that you can assign that account to other people in your family, or you can roll it into a Roth IRA for your child. Let's dive into that a little bit and why that's important.
Sure. So, one of the biggest myths about 529 plans, in addition to people thinking they have to be for a 4-year traditional college,
Right.
is that you somehow lose the money if the named beneficiary or that future child doesn't pursue higher education. It can't be further from the truth. I want
Right.
to stress that the person named on the 529 account as the account owner has complete control at all times over that account. That money is not being lost. In fact, that account owner can change the beneficiary on the account if their child doesn't seem to be using it
Mhm.
to a member of the family of that original beneficiary. It could be yourself as a single mom, if that's your
Mhm.
child. You can use it for your own adult learning, maybe to retool your career. You could
Yep.
use it for another child in the family. A step sibling of that original beneficiary could use it, an aunt or uncle, all the way up to grandparent. You can also save it for your child to use at a later date when they find their way, when they figure out what they really want to study. You can save it for that. You can also save it for your child's children someday. What a gift to have a little nest egg for a grandchild. And then, as you said, Mia, you can now, starting in 2024, January 1, 2024, subject to certain conditions, you can roll a balance from a 529 plan into a Roth IRA for the benefit of the 529 plan beneficiary. So for the benefit of the child, or maybe they're a young adult now, you can roll, I think it's $6,500 a year up to a maximum of $35,000 into a Roth IRA. Why is that important? That gives your child money for their future. And I believe with Roth, you can even take out a certain amount to buy a first home. So if the child didn't use it for college, that's another thing you can do. And then beyond that, you can always take a withdrawal of the money. If you don't need it, you don't know anyone else who needs it, you don't want to roll it into a retirement account for the child, you can always get the money out. You will pay tax on the earnings on that account. Remember, I said at the beginning of this conversation that the account grows tax-free.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't paid taxes during the life of the account. If you put in $10,000, it's worth $11 now. On that $1,000, you will pay state and federal tax because you didn't pay it along the way, and you will pay a federal penalty of 10% on those earnings only. That's not a tremendous amount, but it should be comforting to know you can always get to your money. You're not losing it in any way.
I want to just sort of underscore something, and maybe it's circling back to the beginning a little bit, but why should people put money in a 529 plan instead of just putting it in a savings account where they could have access to it and not have to worry about changing the beneficiary or rolling it into a Roth IRA? I know we talked quickly in the beginning about, 529 plans and what they are, but why should we use a 529 plan? Why not a savings account?
Well, first of all, I want to mention the form of savings that I know most about are 529 plans. I've worked with these now for almost 25 years, and it's what I personally used. I want to also stress that there's no one way to go here. There's nothing wrong with saving in another way if you choose to do so. You have to know yourself best. But some of the benefits to saving in a 529 plan, and by the way, different approaches are not mutually exclusive. You could do a little in a bank account, some in a mutual fund, some in a 529, some other way. But what I like about 529 is that tax-free growth. I think when you're paying less tax, you could have more money for college. I love the control that the account owner has over the account. Unlike bank savings accounts and other forms of accounts where the parent establishes a trust for the child. They're called UGMA or UTMA accounts, Uniform Gift to Minors Act, Uniform Trust Minors Act accounts. Those accounts become the property of the child upon reaching the age of majority. It's 18 or 21, depending on the state. In those accounts, your child gets the money. They get access to the money. They get the money. You have no control over what they do with it. I like the control factor within the 529. We hope our children will grow and develop in a way that, we're comfortable with in terms of pursuits. But if they're going to go buy a motorcycle or do something different with the money, you'd rather have it in a 529 where only you, the account owner, can get at that money. I like that about it. And I also like the fact for financial aid purposes, when you put money in a child's name, whether it's a trust account or otherwise, it is counted more substantially toward federal financial aid. So it's more advantageous. I think up to 20% of the account value can be considered as being able to be used towards the child's education. For the 529, it's considered a parental asset because that's the person who owns it. So in that case, it only counts 5.64%. So it's a much lower threshold for financial aid. Although I want to caution people, financial aid is not often or typically free money. Many times it's comprised largely of student loans. But I do want to point out, if the money's in the child's name, they've got access to it, they can do whatever they want with it. In these other types of accounts, they're not growing tax-free. You're paying tax along the way. And you may have these other consequences as well with respect to 529. I also want to mention anyone can open a 529 account for your child. Oftentimes, friends and family members, a godparent, an aunt or uncle, grandparents are really popular. They can open an account for your child in a 529 plan. if they're the account owner and the child's the beneficiary, they control that account.
Right.
And they have full discretion if they wanted to change it to another grandchild, if they wanted to use it for themselves. So just keep that in mind, whether it's an ex-spouse or it's a grandparent or somebody else. It's very nice that they have an account for the benefit of your child. It's great to have multiple sources of funding for higher education, since it's very important. But if the account is not in your name, you do not control it. So just keep that in mind. A better approach may be for grandparents who are open to it, or partners or ex-partners, is to put the money in the account that you control. Like I said, they can contribute for holidays and so on. So it's just a strategy you want to think of. But just remember, if your name's not on the account as the account owner, you do not control it. Yeah.
And I want to make sure our audience understood the nuance that you mentioned there, which is if the money is in the child's name, this is a very important point because it impacts aid, then it will count against the aid that they're eligible for, albeit that aid is a loan that they're going to have to pay back at a later date. The fact remains that if the money is in the child's name, it counts against the aid that they qualify for. However, if the money is in your name as the parent, or the account, excuse me, then it counts against them for just 5%. Is that the exact figure you said?
5.64%. So on a $2,000 account, $564 of it, up to $564 of a parent-owned 529 account would count. Yeah.
That's a big difference. Now, before we only have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to, because this our audience is single parents, I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the other ways besides 529 plans that single parents or just single income households, it doesn't have to be a single parent necessarily, can prepare for college so that so their child is not saddled with debt.
Right. Well, one of the things I suggest is to start the conversation early in age-appropriate ways about the fact that they will be pursuing higher education and that you're attempting to prepare for the cost. I think that helps manage expectations when it comes time to start going on college tours and deciding which school to go to. Many families throw caution to the wind. They, check out, they let emotion drive the conversation. They set reason aside and they let the child believe that they can go to any institution regardless of net cost. I would start those conversations early about the fact that we're working together. We're going to see what we can afford. No harm in applying to expensive schools, but we're going to see what the offer is ultimately. So I'd start with that. You can invest in many different vehicles, like a bank savings account, like a Roth IRA, like an education savings account. There are many different vehicles that you can go into. Just make sure are there any restrictions on it? Who owns the account? I'd want to know that. Can the beneficiary be changed? Does the child get access to it upon reaching the age of majority? What are the fees and expenses? I know sometimes people are recommending life insurance. I don't know a lot about that as a funding vehicle, but then I sometimes read that comes with very high fees and expenses. You want to know, what is the investment costing you? But there are many different ways to go. It doesn't have to be the 529 plan, but I believe firmly 529 is definitely worth considering. It worked well for me, and it's worked well for many, many families across the U.S.
Bravo. And I think one of the last points I want to touch upon for single parents out there who are listening today is, just approach this subject with grace. I know that I, as a single parent, haven't always been on the ball. And, I didn't open these accounts for my child. I have a 10-year-old son. I didn't open these accounts for my child when he was first born. It took me some time. There was a learning curve. So if you haven't opened an account, when your child's 10, 11, even 17, it's not too late. It's never too late to set aside some money to help offset those costs for college. Right, Patricia?
That is exactly right. Never too early, never too late to begin. And ask your employer for help. A growing number of employers are contributing to 529 accounts. Contribute directly from your paycheck and get some help from the employer. Let them know this is important to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Patricia. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think there was a lot of useful takeaways. And one more time, this is the book if you want to learn more about 529 plans. Thank you, Patricia.
You're welcome.